focusing on the key challenges faced by mature students. And this really came from the LSE 2030 strategy in access. And one of the key things that they highlighted was that mature students are an underrepresented demographic. One of the key things that was also raised as part of the UCAS and also LSE was that they're more likely to show signs of mental health and distress during their times of study. They're more likely to withdraw from their programs than younger students, and they have less determined chance of doing well compared to their initial grades in entry to the examinations. And one of the key things with this was just what is happening that is causing such a decline. Is there something that we can support them with? Okay. So just a bit of the literature review. So one of the things is mature students have been around since the 1950s. It's not a new thing, but they did find that older students are being missed out on the literature. So there's a real lack of research in this area. And there's also a big difference between younger students and mature students. Mature students focus more on their lived experience, trying to implement their career experience and what they've already learned into their studies. Whereas for younger students, they're more focusing on expanding their knowledge and getting them into career. So there's a very different element of how they learn. And that's a really big important thing as we look at this. So what I did for this is I took a bottom-up approach to gain insight from their experiences. So I focused on 3 different areas. I focused on quantitative analysis of firstly the admissions to see, are we having mature students come into LSE or is it predominantly young people? Then I also did a focus group with current mature students and then sent out a survey. So I really wanted to get a broad understanding and take the data analysis and then use that in the focus group to expand further the knowledge. Just a few ethical reviews. I am also a mature student myself, so I had to be very mindful of how I view this as well. So there was a lot of actually reflection I did with my supervisor. And then also power dynamics as well. So I had to make sure that I didn't then put over my opinion into the focus groups and into the surveys. So just something to keep in mind. So the first thing from the data analysis that I did find, so I did the data analysis from 2015 to 2020. And the first thing was find that 35% of mature students were admitted into LSE in 2020. So that is a big amount if you think about it. But when you break it down, the next graph next to you, you will see that for undergraduates, so it says home for home undergraduates who were mature students, there was only 2.11% that were actual mature students. And so that raises the question that if someone's coming back into education, they're less likely to start their career, their education at LSE. They're more likely to go to a different university. Whereas we see the highest number of mature students that we have come to LSE are from overseas. So they're 60.94%. So there's a big disparity between who is actually attending LSE. And I think that was something really important that I wanted to see. Why is there a big difference between what people are coming to? So I moved on to the survey. And this was just more about their experiences. So I wanted to collate the data analysis from the admissions and also survey and focus them more into the focus group. One of the biggest things we found is that they did find that there was a sufficient amount of information, but a lot of students, 70%, found that the academic support was very poor. They felt that actually once they were in, they didn't have the time allocated to support them with their supervisors, with their academics, and especially during COVID, where it's been a lot more isolated, 66% have felt the impact of that, and they do think the quality of education and their ability to participate is really impacted. And it's really important to think about this with mature students. They have a lot of external factors that are playing a big impact into this, whether they have jobs, whether their health, have independence, even just coming back into an education place is very different than going from a young person from school straight into education. So I really wanted to pick these up with the focus groups. And I feel like these key 3 quotes really just highlight what was really spoken about in the focus group. So the first area that we kind of looked at was the tuition fees. And actually, why are people not coming into LSE? Why are they not being admitted at such a high rate? And one of the big factors for people was that they felt that there was not the money to support them. So the fees were very high, and there was a fear that if they came, if they didn't have a scholarship, then they wouldn't be able to progress And we actually find that one person, sorry, it's the middle one, that actually says that they initially were not going to come because of the scholarship. And then they had their own scholarship, but because of COVID, that was taken away. And now they're really struggling and they're having hardships. And it's such a big risk. Do you take a scholarship, but if you don't get it, or if it collapses at any point, what do you do afterwards? And there's many mature students are actually having to deal with high debt and risk, and that's just too much for actually mature students to take on at such a late age. So I think that is a real impact for making it diverse and having older people come to LSE. The other area as well was that it was very different, their experiences from potentially other universities. So someone explained how where they came from another university, they had a lot of support, but when they came here, they found it difficult to transition to the level of work required and the limited amount of support. And I really think it's key there, that transition point, that actually that's a key point that we can help people to succeed, or actually they're going to fall through the gaps. And so that was a real highlight for the call there. And then finally, was making friends. That was actually a big part, that interaction. And I think that's really been felt through this year in COVID, that feeling of isolation. And especially when you're a mature student, where you're less likely to be able to go out to social events and take part in the same way that younger people would be able to. There was that real feeling that if you have friends, that's going to make a world of difference as to whether you succeed or whether you feel like you're going to fail and your grades are going to drop. So my recommendations are quite clear. So there's 3 areas. So the first area is looking at the finance support. I think it is a big risk when you look at how much the fees are. If you don't get a scholarship, that's a lot of money to have to pay. So I think there does need to be more financial support for them. And there also needs to be more financial support put into hardship funds. So if someone does find themselves in that difficult point, they do have the support around, because this will really impact whether they achieve or whether this is going to impact where they're thinking. The second issue is to provide a program to help people as they transition. So this would provide academic, mental and social support as a student starts at LSE. And I think it's really important for us to understand that we need to firstly identify mature students and say, you are one. That's a not bad thing, but we actually need to understand you'll have different barriers than someone that's younger. And in this point, they can advise them where the mental health services are. They can make sure that they're helping them build up friendships as well with people that are similar ages, which is sometimes quite difficult if you're in a program that only has 1 or 2 mature students in. And finally, lengthen the amount of time allocated to appointment slots. And one of the biggest things that came through that was 10 minutes is not a lot of time. By the time you've talked a little bit, it's time to finish the conversation. And mature students would really feel better for having that longer time to discuss things with their supervisors to make sure that they're on track, especially when they feel like they're falling behind. So thank you very much.